Time now for Back Pages tonight here on Sky Sports News, bringing you a first look at the sports stories in the morning's newspapers. Pleased to say, joining us are Ian Ladyman from the Daily Mail and the Sun's Jack Rosser. Welcome to you both. Let's quickly run through the back pages. The Star has more time for Ruben Amorim at Manchester United. Call it, says Art. Art being Arteta down the side. Mail back page has a simple headline: United pay up. That's the compensation for Amorim, a little bit more to get him a little bit earlier. Will England still be smiling after All Blacks showdown? Big rugby game coming up on Saturday. Amorim, you'll adore him. George's call to let emotions flow. Again, that's the rugby union story. And Beerman is on the blocks for Haas. Oliver Beerman in for Haas this weekend in the F1. Some back page, a perfect match. Diego Dallo has an early warning for him, though. And you loaded the gun, Joe. That's the rugby story. LIV joined PGA in a £1 billion deal. Could the war in golf finally be over? And Arteta refs out to get us. The Mirror back page has a simple headline: Portuguese man of awe. And the Telegraph front page supplement says that Amorim is to rip up United scripts while they again cover the rugby. England face loaded gun, quote unquote, after Marla's hacker taunt. And the Times front page of the sports supplement goes with, perhaps unpredictably, the real Jimmy Anderson. Feature interview with the England legend in cricket. And Amorim joins United on a 2.5-year contract. The side story there, pretty simply put by the Times. OK, let's start with the back page of the Star. Jack, I'll come to you. More time. United stars will love playing for new boss, says Nani. Apparently, Nani's been speaking to Rio Ferdinand. Does it feel like it's the perfect match? What do you make of it?
It feels like a bit of a coup for them, doesn't it? Amorim's someone that's been linked with a number of top jobs that was considered by Liverpool in the summer. But it's so hard to tell with a club like Manchester United whether it is one that will work. You know, the pressure that is going to be on Ruben Amorim, that job is like almost no other in world football, maybe just Real Madrid and Barcelona compared to a club the size of Manchester United. The scrutiny he's going to be under, the pressure he's going to be under. And for such a young manager, he's clearly a fantastic coach. But Erik Ten Hag was clearly a fantastic coach when he was picked to take over at Old Trafford a couple of years ago. So it's a club that tests a manager's abilities almost away from the coaching pitch more than anywhere else. And I think that's the side that he's really going to have to crack. You know, from bits and pieces we've read from him and heard from press conferences, he seems like he's got a real charisma about him, something that Ten Hag, you know, a polite, nice man, by all accounts, didn't really have when he was speaking to fans or through the media. So I think that's probably going to be the key thing, and you almost just have to wait and see whether it's going to work. He's clearly an impressive person, an impressive coach that's done very, very well early in his career, but this is a test like nothing else in football, really.
Yep, and it's the sixth time we've been here since Sir Alex Ferguson left, hasn't it? Bounds of optimism and enthusiasm usually about the new managers. Ian, let's go to your paper and the back page of the Mail. United pay up. Amorim is confirmed as head coach after club stump up £900k for early release. Starts on November the 11th on £6.5 million a year deal. So an extra £900k. Ian, could this end up being an expensive mistake potentially if it goes wrong, as we've seen with Ten Hag? That was a pretty pricey layoff this week.
Well, all appointments can potentially end up being an expensive mistake if they don't work out, but a football club can't go into the task of appointing a new manager thinking that way. United have actually behaved like a big club this week, belatedly. They've made a big decision. They've got rid of a manager who they should have got rid of in the summer, and they've done so having already made their mind up and clearly got some way down the road to appointing a replacement, and they've done it quickly. When Sporting have tried to play hardball over the severance and over releasing Amorim, United have put the money on the table and said, there you go, we'll have him now, thank you very much. Exactly the way a big club should behave. There's no point messing about. They need him in soon. They are already, I think, 7 points adrift from the top four. If the result against Chelsea on Sunday doesn't go well, that gap will be greater. The one thing United cannot afford to do you mentioned pounds and pence and finances and expensive mistakes, it would be the biggest and most expensive mistake of all not to qualify for the Champions League for the second year running.
Yeah, the profit and sustainability issues at hand, aren't they? Been losses the last couple of seasons for Manchester United. Interesting here in this piece, Jack, that it says that a delegation flew over. There's been compensation agreed. This is Chris Wheeler reporting in the Mail that there will be included the compensation for assistants Carlos Fernandez, Adelio Candido and Jorge Vital and sports scientist Paulo Barrera. How fascinating a subplot is the backroom staff here in terms of who's going to be there and what's going to happen to Ruud van Nistelrooy, who's mentioned in this piece again?
Yeah, it's something that Amorim, we're led to believe, takes quite seriously. I was told not that long ago when he was speaking to Premier League clubs in the summer that it was sort of 5 to 8 coaches that he was chatting to clubs about bringing over with him. And if you want the proper Amorim package, you need everyone that's helped him get to where he is, really. You want to make your new manager that you're putting so much faith in as comfortable as possible in his new job. And whether having someone like Ruud van Nistelrooy around who will, albeit in an interim capacity, have just stepped back from managing Manchester United for a few games, perhaps winning quite a few games as a stand-in manager of Manchester United, whether he'll be comfortable with having him around or not is a huge decision that needs to be made. You know, it always felt a bit odd looking from the outside for Erik ten Hag to have a huge figure at the club in Ruud van Nistelrooy on his coaching staff. I think the assumption was that he was always sort of just waiting in the wings for this moment to happen, and that was the plan almost from the off, and it must have been an uncomfortable balance. Amorim won't want, and the club really won't want Amorim to be having to look over his shoulder and think about things. So it's a fascinating decision. Van Nistelrooy is clearly a very good coach. He's had success on his own as a manager and was planning to continue down that path until he got the call from Manchester United. So he could, of course, be a real asset if Amorim decides he wants to keep him around. And you do get managers that come into a club they don't know too well and like to have someone that understands a bit of the culture and the history there. So it could be a good blend, a good asset on his staff, but he clearly likes a big backroom staff and one that he knows very well. So it's going to be a delicate thing, I think, the early talks around what happens with Van Nistelrooy.
Van Nistelrooy certainly enjoyed it, hasn't he, seemingly, and revelled in the situation. He says he has got a 2-year contract as an assistant when the new manager comes in, or new head coach, I should say. Ian, wanted to ask you about any related issues here. You mentioned the urgency of Manchester United. Could that be connected at all to the possibility that Manchester City will be without potentially a head coach next season? We'll wait on Pep Guardiola's future.
No, I don't think so. And for Manchester United's sake, I really hope not. Manchester United need to make decisions for the good of Manchester United without worrying about what other clubs might be doing, whether that's Manchester City or Liverpool or anybody else. Manchester United are the biggest football club in this country, possibly the biggest football club in Europe. And I touched on it at the start of the programme. They need to start behaving like one, and they need to get the people that they want. This is a football club that needs to be rebuilt from the bottom up. The squad needs to be reshaped. There needs to be a playing style imposed on that squad because there wasn't one under Erik ten Hag, and there needs to be a culture, a new culture, a positive culture fostered at that football club, at that training ground, in that dressing room. Ruben Amorim has to be allowed to do that absolutely on his own terms. Absolutely no point asking him to keep on people like Ruud van Nistelrooy if he doesn't want to. He has to be allowed to reshape this football club in his own image. He's done it at Sporting. As Jack mentioned earlier, there's a huge leap from the Portuguese First Division. He's won it twice. Fair play to him for that. A huge leap from that division to this one. And if he's going to do it, he's going to have to be allowed to do it his own way. You have to put faith in him and let him get on with it.
On that note of cultural shift, Jack, let's go to the front page of the Telegraph Sports Supplement. James Ducker, Northern football correspondent, reporting that Amorim is to rip up United's script. He says the club are confident appointments will transform team's identity. Says the Portuguese to start on November the 11th after signing a 2.5-year deal. And Manchester United reports, James Ducker, that United believe Ruben Amorim's appointment as head coach will usher in a new style and approach and signals a sharp culture shift from previous managers. If Van Gaal couldn't shift the culture, if Mourinho couldn't, how optimistic are you that Ruben Amorim can, Jack?
it's going to be a huge task for him, isn't it? Because this is a club and a role that sort of eats up managers, no matter how successful they've been since Sir Alex Ferguson left. But I think maybe the difference here is that they've caught a young manager who is properly on his way up. You know, Jose, there were questions around Van Gaal was an older manager when he came into the club. Amorim feels like he's got a bit of momentum with him, someone that a few of the players will know and clearly respect. I think there were some comments brought up from Bruno Fernandes speaking a few months ago, talking highly of him. Diego Dallo has spoken highly of him in today's papers, tonight's papers even. So I think that getting the players on side and getting them to believe in that will be the first real task, and obviously turning that into results rather quickly, because, you know, he's been given a 2.5-year deal, which wouldn't suggest that Manchester United or you know, the Ineos side of it see this as a long-term plan. They want him to put a rocket up this club and really put his mark on quickly and get things going. So he seems to have the personality to be able to do that. Players, it sounds like, absolutely love playing for him and love putting into practice what he does. But as we've mentioned a few times, doing it at Old Trafford is going to be a real task.
Yeah, you mentioned the connotation of that contract being perhaps that he needs to start at a pace. He's certainly had a fantastic, highly paced early career, hasn't he, with those titles at Sporting last couple of seasons, and they're well set in the league after a big win again tonight. The Sun has the headline then, perfect match. Quotes from Diogo Dallo here, fellow Portuguese, of course, but a former Porto player. Not sure if there's a rivalry there. Says that Ruben Amorim has been hailed as a perfect match for Manchester United. Dallo citing his young mentality. He's a former Portugal international, Ian, so he's got that playing pedigree. How important, though, is age? Is it becoming a young man's game, the coaching world, compared to what it was maybe 20, 30 years ago?
And we are seeing a few more young coaches in the game, but equally, you look at the current European champions who are coached by one of the most venerable coaches out there, Carlo Ancelotti. Look, it doesn't matter how old you are; it just matters. It absolutely just matters how good you are. And one of the problems that Amorim will find and will be aware of very, very quickly when he walks through the door at Old Trafford is that the squad that he inherits isn't good enough. And when I say it's not good enough to win the league. That squad will not win the league, whoever the manager is, whether it's Pep Guardiola, Carlo Ancelotti, Jurgen Klopp. That squad can't win. That squad cannot win the league. So Amorim's obligation straight away is to improve it. It's certainly good enough to finish in the top four. That's got to be an initial aim, and then you go from there. His age is absolutely irrelevant. And people talk about, he's a perfect match. Players always say that when new coaches. When have you ever heard a player greet a new coach by saying, well, this bloke's not going to be good enough? They always say he's going to solve all our problems. They are part of the problem. The players at Manchester United are part of the problem. You could argue they are 80% of the problem because they're not good enough and they don't play to the capabilities either. There's so much to improve there. And if you're Ruben Amorim, I suppose you look at it and see, well, at least there's something to do. I can put my mark on it. I can put my stamp on it. Doesn't matter how old he is. He needs to get a tune out of those players in a way that Ten Hag never did. Ten Hag leaves after 2.5 years. We don't really know what he was. We don't know what his team was. We don't know what his playing style was. We don't know what his philosophy was. I think he left it behind in Amsterdam when he came from Ajax 2.5 years ago. Amorim can't do that. Whatever he's done to be successful in Portugal, he's got to bring it with him, tweak it, adapt it to the Premier League, and then persuade that football club to buy some better players because they need some.
It's a question of defining success as well, isn't it, Jack? Traditionally, in the Premier League era, it was winning the title for Manchester United. Ten Hag got a third-place finish. We've seen Solskjaer and Mourinho finish second in the post-Sir Alex Ferguson era. But the question is, can they get over the line? And Jamie Carragher has been speaking on Sky Sports News and writing in The Telegraph also on this theme. He says that Amorim will hit the ground running, but his biggest test comes in 18 months, and that's whether he can produce a title challenge. How difficult will that be for him to achieve, Jack? I suppose there are other variables involved, including Pep Guardiola's future.
I think the biggest variable is what he's given, by this new footballing structure at Manchester United. This is their first appointment, and this is the real chance now to furnish him with a squad that actually fits together and works for what he wants to do. The squad that he's inheriting, as Ian said, isn't good enough to challenge, but also is quite hard to identify how they relate to one another and what sort of team they're trying to build there. You need players that fit the system, players that want to be there to really kick on and buy into something. So I think the initial task is not to obviously this season get them up there with Manchester City, but it's to see something that everyone can relate to, can buy into, a system, an approach to playing the game that fans enjoy and are excited by, but also can identify with, and then something that the club can go out and sell to high-level transfer targets to give Ruben Amorim the chance to compete across the long term and build something that lasts a bit longer than a cup run, which is all they've really had in recent years. You know, the odd trophy here and there to sustain a manager a bit longer, but nothing that's lasted beyond that. That's going to be the real challenge. So it is on Amorim to build that and convince players to come, but it's also on that new structure around him to help him do just that and get them right back to the top.
And I suppose, Ian, as well, there's an argument that Manchester United's greatest achievement or greatest moment since Sir Alex Ferguson left was in May against Manchester City in the FA Cup final win. Erik Ten Hag's released a statement, hasn't he, today, and covered in the Telegraph here. Ten Hag, sorry dream is over. A very fan-oriented message, actually, reference to supporters throughout of it. Ian, can this man come again? Do you envisage seeing Ten Hag at a big club in the future, linked with Bayern Munich in the summer, wasn't he?
You know what? I would like to say yes. I would really like to say yes, because he's not an old manager. He's a decent bloke, Ten Hag. He's carried himself with great dignity during what has been a quite difficult couple of years in Manchester. But in terms of whether he can come again, I don't know, because he didn't show anything of himself in those 2.5 years. He really didn't. He talked endlessly about that FA Cup win against Manchester City. Brilliant performance end of last May to beat City. But the point was that performance was an outlier. That was an outlier performance. There was no sign of it before it came, and there's been no sign of it subsequently. Honestly, Erik Ten Hag leaves this country. I've watched a lot of Manchester United over the years. I've watched a lot of Erik Ten Hag Manchester United. I don't know what they were, and I don't really know what he is. So it would be very glib of me to sit here and say, yes, he'll be back at another big club. You know what? I don't know, because he's fallen quite a long way.
It's topsy-turvy time, wasn't it? Confusing, as you say, in periods. Ian, Jack, thank you very much for now. We will take a quick break. When we come back, we will look at more of the back pages, including this in the Telegraph. A cricket line. Stokes plans test boost by missing IPL. You're watching Back Pages tonight. Welcome back to you, and welcome back to Ian Ladyman from the Daily Mail and the Sun's Jack Rosser. Let us go to the Telegraph front page of the sports supplement and come to you, Ian. England to face quote-unquote loaded gun after Marler's hacker taunt. Fantastic rugby game in prospect at Twickenham on Saturday afternoon. England against New Zealand in the autumn series. But has this Marler gaffe, if you like, is it given the emphasis, do you think, to New Zealand? What have you made of the whole controversy?
It's an extraordinary story, given that Joe Marler's not actually playing. I've come across lots of instances in my career of seeing players wind up the opposition on purpose or by mistake. I've rarely seen a player who's not involved in the game do it. I'm sure the England dressing room will be absolutely chuffed to bits with Marler's contribution. Very, very quickly, my view on the hacker. Growing up as a kid, watching rugby union on the TV, as far as I'm concerned, the hacker's always been part of the theatre whenever New Zealand have played, part of the atmosphere. It's an expression of culture and of heritage. I don't really see why an opposition player would have a great issue with it, as long as it's done within the bounds of decency and all the rest of it, and they stay in their own half and do it that way. I think it's to be valued and cherished. And I will say this, that if you're an international rugby union player and all you're worrying about in the run-up to a big fixture is what your opponents are doing in their own half before the game has even started, then I would suggest that you've probably got your priorities a little bit wrong. Yeah, I think it's probably more scary what playing New Zealand in the actual rugby match itself, isn't it, if you think about how fearsome they can be. Jack, let's move on to golf. In your paper, LIV joined PGA in a £1 billion deal. Tell us what's going on. Is the ice finally thawed? Is the world unified in golf?
I think it might be a little while yet before you can call golf unified, but there's been little bits, hasn't there, for such a long time now, since there was the sort of shock announcement that the talks were happening over a deal, that bits have been dripping out. There's been meetings here and there. Rory McIlroy has said something, Tiger Woods has said something, but now David Facey in our paper reporting that the deal is pretty much there, £1 billion deal that will see a couple of that will see LIV merge with the PGA Tour and become part of that calendar. And I think really, without getting into all of the politics of it, which have been discussed ad nauseum over the last couple of years, I think golf fans will be glad to hear news like this if they can get to see the best playing the best, if not every week, most weeks again. You know, you lose the likes of John Rahm from the schedule. It's not really good for the average fan. You want to switch on and watch that. You don't really care about how much money they're playing for or who's earning what from where. You want to watch the best golfers play each other. That's the drama of it, the theatre of it, and it will be good. Golf will be in a much better place if we can see that on a regular basis again.
Feels like the sport needs it, doesn't it? Let's dip back into football. Got a bit of time. Big game at St James's Park, Saturday lunchtime, Ian. And in the sun there, to the side of the Amorim story, refs aren't out to get us. Mikel Arteta says there is no referees conspiracy against Arsenal. It was controversial, wasn't it, with Anthony Gordon's goal last year? What do you expect in this game? It feels big for both teams, doesn't it?
Yeah, I just feel big for both teams. It is big for both teams. I'd be interested to go back to Arteta on those comments at full time tomorrow if they've lost to a disputed goal, and see if he's still singing from the same hymn sheet there. It is a huge game. Arsenal have lost a little bit of ground at the top of the league. They're still my favourites to win the league, by the way. I tipped them at the start of the season. I've not seen anything yet to wave from that. They've had some injuries. They've had a couple of disappointing results. Long way to go. I think Mikel Arteta's got a super squad there with a great mentality. Newcastle is really, really interesting. It's so interesting at Newcastle. They've not won since September the 15th in the league. I think that's 5 games. The Saudi owners there's some suggestions that they might be rowing back a little bit on the investment. Eddie Howe was booed by his own supporters last Sunday at Stamford Bridge for taking off Sandro Tonali. It just seems like a little bit on a knife edge, the whole thing at Newcastle, right from the start of the summer when Eddie was outspoken with his views on the sporting director, Paul Mitchell. It's all felt very unsettled at Newcastle, and it still feels very much that way to me.
A bit of jeopardy for both teams, isn't there? Look forward to that on Saturday at lunchtime in the aftermath of it. Let's do a quick cricket story. We've got about 20 seconds. Jack, Stokes plans test boost by missing IPL. This is a victory for sporting purists, sport over money, and for the test game, I suppose.
It definitely is. And as somebody that likes cricket and watches cricket but isn't always invested, you always want to see the best players playing in the best format, which is the test game. And it is such a huge year for England next year that they will want a consistent and high-performing Ben Stokes to be fully focused on what they're doing and try to have a hugely successful year as well. It's a big test for him and the coach, Baz McCullum, next year as well. So they'll want everyone properly invested.
Yeah, the Ashes is going to be epic, isn't it? Jack and Ian, thank you very much for your time tonight on Back Pages tonight. Have a good weekend. Enjoy the sport. Hope to see you again soon. If you missed any of the show, another chance to see Back Pages tonight at hour. It's also available as a podcast. Just download Back Pages on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Up next then, more on Manchester United's new head coach, Ruben Amorim.